Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, it's our part 2 to Francis's part 2 with the 1974 film, The Godfather Part 2. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, or join us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel, and if you've ever had to try to forgive Fredo, you're sweet and helpless and ready for The Next Reel's Instagram hashtag Pony Prize, hashtag Guess the Movie Challenge.
And with that, let's check in with Games Master Stephen Smart, currently out on a boat in Lake Tahoe saying his Hail Marys in the hopes of catching a fish, so we can find out who won this week.
Hey guys, this week's movie was Just Friends from 2005, starring Ryan Reynolds, Amy Smart and Anna Faris. Congrats to AQS Morning View who guessed it on Image 1. You're entered once again into the 2016 Pony Prize hat. As always, a new challenge starts on Monday, so thanks guys and see you later.
And we got a blot spot friend of the show, Ben Lott, wrote in with his reaction to The Godfather.
This blot spot really made me happy, Pete.
As it should.
I don't usually connect well with gangster movies because I can't find any good people to care about. And that was my experience the first time I watched The Godfather. Well, on my second watch, I find it has aged like a fine wine. I loved it and was invested in every minute. The music, the directing, the acting, it's all brilliant. I wonder if it will continue to race up my chart each time I watch it. Now I went from not interested in watching part 2 to anxious. Your rank 1, my rank 17.
I like every word of that.
Me too.
Fine wine.
Absolutely. That's what we like to hear.
Absolutely. Andy, it's time. Let's do trailers.
I'm pretty excited about mine. It's called The Belko Experiment, and it looks like a crazy little movie. Now, for those of you who've been tuning into our Speakeasy episodes, when we had Abraham Ben-Ruby on the show, you might remember that he mentioned this was something that he had been working on. This is directed by Greg McLean. I don't know if it's McLean or if it's McLean.
Not after this movie.
It's the latter. But Greg is a writer, director, writer, producer. He did Wolf Creek, which is a gruesome little movie. I don't know if you ever watched that one. But,
What do you think? What do you think?
I pretty much know you never saw that one. Oh man, or Rogue, or Wolf Creek 2, or the TV miniseries Wolf Creek, or he's doing Wolf Creek 3. I guess he really is enjoying that series, which is I've only seen the first one, but oof, it was a brutal movie. But this one is it's the basic the IMDb plot summary is: in a twisted social experiment, 80 Americans are locked in their high-rise corporate office in Bogota, Colombia, and ordered by an unknown voice coming from the company's intercom system to participate in a deadly game of kill or be killed.
That pretty much is what I saw.
It's pretty much what it is. And it's bloody. You've got people's heads blowing up, and people kind of, it kind of turns into that situation where it's like, if you're not going to, turn and kill somebody, you might either get your head blown up or have somebody kill you, and everybody starts getting a little crazy and violent. The thing that really intrigues me about this is that James Gunn, our old friend from Guardians of the Galaxy, he's actually writing this one, and that thrills me to no end. So I'm really curious about how this is going to be, and just to see exactly what happens here. But it's got a great cast: Sean Gunn, Michael Rooker, John C. McGinley, Tony Goldwyn, Abraham Ben-Ruby, I already mentioned, Adria Arjona, and, I don't know. I think this looks like a really interesting take on the kind of the horror film and the social experiments film. So I'm quite excited. What do you think of this one?
Oh, Andy. Let me say this. I think that Sean Gunn is really funny. I like him as an actor. How's that? That's a start. Michael
awesome.
Rooker, I like him too. John C. McGinley, big fan of him on Scrubs. Of course, John Gallagher Jr., big fan of John Gallagher Jr. He was on Newsroom, the hit Aaron Sorkin canceled show. Right. Yeah, no, there's a lot to like about this movie. I'm not sure I'm crazy about them blowing each other up as much as that, but this looks like a clever twist on an age-old locked room murder horror story. I love the idea of the building. I love the name, the clever name off of Belko. I love the whole idea of making a psychological experiment, a murder show. And I don't know if I'm going to see it. I'm going to say it's out there. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to see this. I guarantee you I won't see it in the theaters. I guarantee that. But there is a chance. There's a non-zero chance, Andy, that I will see this movie.
You do have a little bit of a horror tendencies hiding away in there. We all know this, Pete.
I'm coming to terms with it. With my trailer tonight as well. So I'm sort of looking forward to this film. So please, when does it hit?
Well, it's going to be opening March 17th next year. So very much looking forward to it, and I can't wait to talk to you more about it then.
Yeah, that'll be a delight. Well, my trailer, Andy, is also a bit of a gruesome story.
Yes, it is.
I was actually torn, and you were bullying me to do Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which I'm just going to say as a plug, go watch that trailer. It's hysterical. It's funny every time I watch it. It's fantastic. Go see it. But the trailer I am doing tonight is The Autopsy of Jane Doe. This is from director Andre Øvredal Now, you will know Andre Ervdahl.
Oh, yes, Pete.
Yes, you will, because he is the director behind Troll Hunter, a show we did some time ago.
What a fun little movie.
That was a great movie, and that was a listener's choice, wasn't it?
Nope.
No, that was just
part
us. We chose that?
That was part of our found footage film.
Oh, that's
series.
right. That's what it was. That was a great show and a really fun movie, and I even liked that. So when I saw that Andre was behind this film, it stars Brian Cox and Emile Hirsch, and they play, okay, I'm just going to say it, father and son coroners. Yeah, I love that. They get a homicide victim with no apparent cause of death, and as they start unraveling the cause of death during their investigation, during the autopsy, they uncover a mystery. And it looks like it's a bit of the supernatural is involved, a bit of the occult, perhaps. I don't know. Hints abound. But I'm looking forward to this movie. It's very strange. Written by Ian Goldberg and Richard Nang. Ian Goldberg is behind. He is a producer of Once Upon a Time, which is not a horror program. If you have watched it, he is also producer of Dead of Summer, which I've never heard, but it has dead in it, and the poster actually is a tire swing with only legs sticking out of it, no torso. So I have to imagine it has sort of a similar vibe to this one. And Richard Nang is the writer behind, he had written part of the series of Dead of Summer, so that's how the two of them came together. He's a producer of a few other films, and Better Living Through Chemistry, etc. So looks like an interesting feature. Emile Hirsch, I'm a fan of Emile Hirsch. Brian Cox, obviously we love Brian Cox. And so I think there's a lot to look forward to in this movie. I find it strange that I'm coming out as a potential horror enthusiast.
I think it's funny because mine is rated R for strong bloody violence throughout, language including sexual references and some drug use. And yours is rated R for bloody horror violence, unsettling grisly images, graphic nudity, and language. Mine has bloody violence throughout, but yours has yours actually sounds like the scarier movie. Mine sounds like a bloody thriller, and yours sounds like the horror. And it's like it sounds like it's completely backward.
I love it.
I think it looks really interesting, and I love this whole idea of this father and son coroner team trying to solve this mystery.
That's the thing that locks me in too.
Oh, it's so funny, but it just looks really creepy and really intriguing. So I really enjoyed the imagery in the trailer, particularly creepy after the lights all explode and go out, and they're in the basement of their lab, and they look around with the flashlight, and all of the little the doors to the different slabs are all open and empty.
That is so creepy. Oh, it's creepy.
Oh, that's
and Dad is nowhere to be found, right? Dad is gone.
Yeah.
Oh, it's creepy. Well, this is already out on the festival circuit. It hit Fantastic Fest and London Film Festival. Toronto, it opened September 9th through October. Chicago, Philadelphia, Monsters of Film in Stockholm. It doesn't hit the U.S. Well, it actually very, very soon, December 21st. Limited release in December 21st of this year. I am sure a wider release after the new year. It ain't the way I wanted it. I can handle things. I'm smart. Not like everybody says, like dumb. I'm smart, and I want respect.
Don Vito Corleone and his son Michael both had seen the ones they loved most cut down before their eyes. Both had killed as an act of vengeance. Both commanded the most powerful and merciless crime organization in the world.
Is it true that in the year 1950, you devised the murder of the heads of the so-called 5 families in New York?
It's a complete falsehood.
They would take any measures.
I mean, you've won. You want to wipe everybody out?
I don't feel I have to wipe everybody out, Tom. Just my enemies.
Make any arrangement.
Michael, we're bigger than U.S. Steel.
Order any death. To protect the empire they controlled. The Godfather and his heir. Both were men of ice, and both were targets.
The Godfather Part 2, Andrew. 1974. This continues the story of Michael Corleone and his rise to power as leader of the largest crime family in New York and Nevada. And it takes place in two periods, and that way we shoehorn Robert De Niro in the movie too, which is exciting. Obviously directed by Francis Ford Coppola, written by Coppola and Mario Puzo again, and stars Al Pacino, Robert Duvall, Diane Keaton, Robert De Niro, John Cazale, Talia Shire, Lee Strasberg, and others. How did this movie hit you on the heels of our experience with our new #1 film in 3.5 years on our flick chart list, The Godfather, last week?
This is a really strong film. It's really powerful. It's really dark. It's very, I want to say convoluted, but I don't mean that in a bad way. But it's very, the story, there's a lot going on in the story, particularly the present day story or present day as in Al Pacino's story, which is really 1958, 59. That story has just a lot of elements that are being woven through as far as Michael and his machinations. It's a very Machiavellian story as far as what he's doing and kind of working to deal with this attempted assassination that happens toward the beginning of the film. I really love all of that. I think it's just done so well, and it's so intriguing. And I don't watch it often enough to actually remember all of the different points. So it ends up feeling very fresh every time I watch it, which I think is probably a good thing. And then there's the whole side with Robert De Niro as young Vito, as he's growing up, and you get to see him kind of coming into power as a godfather and doing it really to bring his family together. And I think what I find so powerful about the strength of this film is watching these two different Corleones as they're kind of rising to power, as they're strengthening their position, and how different that experience is for each of them, and really kind of what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. I find it absolutely fascinating, and I really love it. I love watching this movie.
You know, I think I agree with everything you just said, and I still, it doesn't connect for me as well, certainly as well as Godfather 1 did. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that I hope we will sort of peel apart over this conversation. What I love about this film, first of all, it is built on such a profoundly fantastic foundation, right? The story of this family. I am deeply interested in the story of this family. I'm deeply interested in the bifurcation of periods here, that we get to see the two father stories, right, as they progress through time, kind of in parallel. I really like all of that. I love how it was shot. I love the color. I love the overall experience of the age of the look of the film. I think it's really powerful. I love the way this film opens up the mechanics of crime and politics. The first film is a very, very much of an inward-looking film, right? It's very much how, how the family relates to itself and how the families relate to each other. But you don't see as much of the mechanics of how the families relate to the world around them, right? You get a little bit of that when they go down to Hollywood, but you don't get as much, or Nevada, they go to Las Vegas. You don't get as much of that in the first film, as certainly as you do here. And here, it bleeds into politics, which I think is a wonderful journey that we get to go on with Michael and the senator, and the way that crime and mob families interact with each other, negotiate with one another. I think it's a fantastic experience. And yet, I find it's harder to watch. It's a significantly longer film. Well, maybe not significantly. What is it, a half hour longer?
Yeah, another half
than
hour.
The first one. It's another half hour than the first movie. And it feels much longer than that. To me, it took multiple settings. It wasn't the kind of film that I could just sit down and get engrossed in over the course of it. My hunch is that's because of the time split, and obviously they include an intermission in this film. All of that breaks up my experience such that I found myself wishing I kind of wish there was a Godfather 4 and that they had taken this and split it in two. So overall, a strong experience. This is, for me, not in contention for number one.
I'm not one of those people who have ever really kind of put number two over number one, but there are certainly the supporters for this film that rank it higher than the first film. And I think that's because of the really interesting structure that Coppola chose to do here, and the way that he chose to not just tell a pulpy, Godfather story, this kind of story of this family and this crime and all this sort of stuff, and how this good son ends up kind of turning, but really taking a little more artsy approach to it. And you have, like I said, all of the machinations that son is now doing in his timeline, but then you also have that comparing and contrasting with the father, and that was something Coppola really wanted to explore. Actually, long before he ended up making this film, he just had this whole idea of following a father and son at the same age and seeing how their lives kind of took different paths. And I think that's just something that kind of stemmed from his curiosity to tell stories in interesting ways. And certainly, I mean, he's always been one of those directors who's always tried to kind of do one for him and then one for the studio and one for him and one for the studio. And certainly, right between these two, he was hired to write The Great Gatsby, and then he also directed The Conversation, which is a really great film in its own right. And I think that's something that a lot of people have latched onto with this film, is that really interesting construction and looking at these lives and how different they are and everything. And I certainly appreciate it. I really enjoy the two stories. But yeah, kind of like you, I've always enjoyed the first Godfather more than I've enjoyed this one.
It's kind of exhausting. How many times did you have to sit down and watch it to get through it this week?
Well, I mean, I don't know if that's a fair comparison, because I wasn't able to watch the original Godfather in one sitting. So neither of them have been finished in one sitting.
I did make it through the first one, and that's why I'm a little bit biased. But this one I fell asleep a couple of times. So over 2 nights, I don't know how much time I blacked out. And the next morning I watched it, I realized, goodness, this is essentially half a day. To get through this movie. It's effectively half a day once you throw in some bathroom breaks and snacks, and so it's a tough watch for me in that regard. And I think I find the length, and I just find the length a bit of a deterrent, and so I'm left asking this question. And I think I know the answer to this, but I'm curious your perspective. Would it have been a better release to do this chronologically? Do you think the benefit of having the two stories running in parallel as an experiment of Coppola's adds enough value to the viewing experience for you?
You know what's funny is my first viewing of this was actually the chronological version of all three films.
Oh, that's kind of a cheat for the first time.
I know. Up until that point, I had only seen The Godfather, and then I ended up watching the Godfather saga, which took all three films, added a whole bunch of deleted scenes and all that sort of stuff, and it was just this one sprawling, like nearly 10-hour movie. Is basically how it worked, and so I don't know. I went into this story knowing it chronologically before I ever actually saw the film the way that he originally released it. So I definitely enjoy the chronological version. It feels very novelish. You kind of are just going from this story, then you go to this story, and then you go to this story, and it just kind of moves you through it. Having subsequently seen Godfather 2, as he originally released it, I have found that I definitely prefer the intercut version.
I find it difficult, and I ultimately I agree with you, right? I mean, of course, we would need some more material for the earlier film if we were to try and split it, and that sort of armchair editorializing is what it is. But I did find I was more interested in the earlier story, right? I was much more engaged with young Vito's story, and his the sort of early thug days, and what the specific turning points, these butterflies that flap their wings that allow him to go from being an innocent Sicilian kid to a mob kingpin, right? Those elements I thought were really strong in this movie, and they were the same things that I latched onto in the first film that I think were so strong. This one, I find myself more distracted by the mechanics of the politics. I think it was less elegant than any single element in the first movie.
It's so tricky for me because I actually used to pull the second Congress scene when you have Frankie Pentangeli doing his testimony and his subsequent conversation with Tom. I would play those two scenes in my screenwriting class, and when we would talk about subtext.
It's a great example. Great example.
The way the screenplay is structured, and just all those examples of subtext. Really, not just there, but I mean throughout the whole film. I just find it so powerful and interesting that I'm constantly interested in this film. I get it. I see where you're coming from. It's long, and the interesting thing about those particular scenes is they're not ever really set up, and that's something that I can understand why it would all of a sudden seem like a little bit of a roadblock, is because, you're watching the film and then you come back from a flashback watching Vito in the past, and next thing you know, you're sitting in this big hearing as these people are testifying before this Senate hearing. And it can be a little off-putting because it's like, how did all this happen? And there's no real setup for it. And so to that end, I definitely understand.
Yeah, that is true. Although on the other hand, I actually find it's appealing because I get my sense is that Coppola and Puzo in particular are putting a lot of faith in the viewer. And I think that's, they don't hold my hand at all in this movie, right? And as many times as I've seen it, which is not as many as I've seen The Godfather, the original film, I really appreciate that they allow me to explore as an audience member what's going on and to just trust that I'll keep up.
There's an element that I definitely want to bring up about this whole idea of Clemenza and how Coppola, we talked about last week how, he had been talking to Richard Castellano about coming back as Clemenza, and Castellano wanted to have approval to have, somebody that, by his approval to rewrite his lines or write all of his part for him, or he would write it, something like that. And Coppola is just like, no, that's not going to happen. That's not how it works. And this argument went on all the way up until they were practically ready to shoot, and he couldn't get this deal together with Castellano. And so finally Coppola is just like, oh, forget it. It's not going to work. And so he just wrote Clemenza dead. And then he basically gave the whole part of Clemenza over to this other character, Frankie Pentangeli, which kind of became his replacement. And they had this, brief moment where they talk about how Clemenza had died right there at the very beginning at the party. I think that it's a really interesting change. I don't know if it really affects the story too much, but I do find it really interesting knowing that, we see basically the formation of the partnership between Vito Corleone and a young Clemenza, played by Bruno Kirby. And I think it's so great. You see this partnership form, and even Tessio and kind of all of this stuff as they kind of kick off this whole beginning of the Corleone crime family. And then knowing that it could have been Clemenza in Pentangeli's part all the way through the end, and going through almost testifying before the Senate, and then his brother showing up and he backs out, and then he kills himself. How interesting would that have been if it was really kind of like this saga of this relationship between Clemenza and the Corleone family? I find that just really fascinating to think about that. That's potentially how the story could have gone.
Oh, I totally agree, because what you end up with is this manufactured story that we have to take time and emotional attention to like build our connection to with Pentangeli, and as a surrogate to this dramatic element that we could have had carry over from the first film. it seems like such a sad shame that they weren't able to work this out, in any greater sort of substantive way. I wasn't as crazy about the Pentangeli part this time, and I think it's directly the result of knowing the backstory.
Huh, interesting. I can see that. I mean, I don't think it bugs me too much, but I do find it really interesting to think about.
Just as an aside, we talked last week about how Vito seemed to know things before we knew them, right? That he read subtext much better than we did.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember that? You were there.
Oh, yes. I was there.
So is that a genetic thing? Because apparently Michael does the same thing in this movie. How does he know all the stuff that he always seems to know? Like, does he get a daily briefing that we're not in charge of, that we don't get to sit in on?
Yeah, these guys really are tapped into, everybody's poker face. They they're clearly able to read everybody much better than we are, because, I mean, Michael's always doing things, and I'm like, okay, so I think he thinks that person is against him, and he's playing him, or is that person really his partner? I don't know, but he seems to know, and I guess that's...
Oh, the Pentangeli, Hyman Roth, Rossetti brothers, whoever the brothers are,
right.
The whole, Rosados, the whole onion of duplicity, right? The layer upon layer of duplicity that Michael, has to peel apart, and really does not let us in as members of the audience what he's doing until it's all done. And even then, it feels like I'm not entirely sure if I'm to believe Michael was on top of this. I mean, there's one particular view of this movie that you could walk away thinking, wow, this second story in terms of the Empire Strikes Back of trilogies, this is pretty dark. Like, it's pretty clumsy. He's losing control of the family. Like, nobody wants to hang out in Tahoe with him anymore. And everybody's kind of lazing around or killing each other. And they're going to Congress, and there's a hearing, and it's just awful. Like, everything's really bad. Like, it seems like Michael is deeply out of his league in taking over the family business.
Not to mention that, but, the whole idea that Vito had to put all this together was to take care of his family. And here you just watch Michael just totally destroying his family. And it's just awful. Not just his marriage, but I mean, his relationship with his brother and just everything. And even Tom, he almost kills that relationship. I mean, he really is terrible. And he's just going down such a dark road. And it's really interesting because you look at everything that Vito's doing, and it just like that last moment you have with Vito when he's just waving with Michael, and it's just like, Michael, say goodbye, and it's so sweet and tender, this whole moment of this father and son. And then at the end of Michael's story, you just have this kind of this cold person who kicks his wife out and kills his brother, and it's just everything about him is so off-putting, and there's nothing there that is it really seems like nothing's there for the family. And that's something in the script that I really enjoy in that very last scene, that birthday flashback that you have back to 1941, where he's kind of come back from, or he tells the family he's gonna go join the military, and Sonny is totally mad at him for doing that and everything. But he's got that line. He's like, I have my own plans for my future. And I kind of think that really ends up saying everything about him and his place. It's like he's not he's trying to do stuff for the family, or at least he says he is, but in a way he really is Walter White here, or you could say Walter White is him. He's really doing it because it's his story, and he wants to do what he wants to do. And I think that is really what the essence of this particular film is. He's enjoying it. And even though it seems like he's trying to do it for the family, he's really doing it because this is how he wants to do things.
That's really interesting. And it says a lot about the parallel storylines too, because we have the young Vito storyline is all about building up, right? It's about taking action to build strength in a family, in a brand new family, because he's starting literally from nothing. I mean, he is alone on a boat. And he's coming over here, his entire family is gone, and he's coming over here to start from scratch and build up in that storyline. And the parallel storyline is Michael ripping things apart because he can't get out of his own way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Briefly on Coppola's direction here, we dove pretty deep on Coppola last time, but do you feel like you got anything out of watching this film as in close proximity to the first film regarding Coppola as a director?
I think that he just, again, really has a very steady hand and knows how to tell the stories that he's doing. He admits that I think, he started playing around with the conversation and stationary cameras and the way that he would position things, and that he felt that there was definitely some influence from that film with this film. And I definitely think you can see some of that, how there's a moment early on when Michael, I can't remember which character comes into the room, but Michael dismisses Tom, his consigliere, and Tom leaves. And instead of staying with Michael to hear the conversation, the camera follows Tom leave, and you see him continue out the window, while the audio, you're still in the room listening to Michael have this conversation. Some really interesting kind of directing choices like that I feel like, he started playing around with when he was doing the conversation and as he kind of continues his directing moving forward. So I think that it's just a really it's an interesting way to kind of explore some more creative things, some more avant-garde types of filmmaking, while on a really big scope. And so I have found it really fascinating.
The particularly that audio trick is employed again with in it's like the sex club, right, in Havana.
Yeah.
Where we have Fredo actually slip up, and that is not only one of the really interesting uses of this trick, but it's also two of the great performances between Cazale and Pacino, as Pacino is standing behind him, and they're, it is framed perfectly. The cuts work so well. The audio is one consistent track, and it is a very strong reveal ultimately of the big, the chaos in Fredo's own head. So it's really, really well done. It turns out he didn't want to direct this, Coppola. He didn't want to do this one. And yet, ultimately, it ended up being, according to him, the smoothest big picture he's ever done.
Yeah, I think what's so funny is that, he had done the first one. He's just like, what more do I have to tell with this story? I already did it. I mean, there wasn't a second book. And so, they were just like, no, you got to do it. It was so successful. We need more money. Is kind of the studio's attitude. So he's just like, no. And he tried to get them to actually hire Martin Scorsese. And they're like, Martin Scorsese will never direct this picture. All the same stuff that they were saying about Marlon Brando being in the first film and all that craziness. And so I think finally he ended up succumbing, and he saw some options to do the story. I mean, kind of how we've already talked about the direction of the two different parallel stories. And obviously some more money to direct it, to make it bigger and everything. And then weirdly, part of his requirement to direct it was he wanted to name it The Godfather Part 2, because he didn't want people to think it was, something else. He wanted to make it feel like it really was just a continuation of that first story. Maybe part of that was because the whole Vito Corleone part of the film is really still based on that first book, and it's only the Michael Corleone part that's new. But anyway, what's so interesting about that is they agreed, and he ended up making it, obviously. But by doing so, this is really kind of the inadvertent origin of sequel numbering. They didn't have any sequel numbering before this, so this was it.
Everything went to hell after that. Jeez.
Oh, yes. Sharknado 3D.
Exactly. But see, the only sequel I can think of right now is The Rescuers Down Under. Why am I completely... First shot, last shot, Andy.
Yes, for our first shot, we start with a close-up of Michael's face as people kiss his hand, and before we cut to the chair and see the title screen.
And the last shot, Michael, predictably, is all alone in an autumnal setting. We are guessing he's at his Lake Tahoe retreat. He's sitting outside. We push slowly into his face. He is aged now, and we fade. How does this work? Does this work as well as the first film?
I think it does. I think it gives you a good sense of kind of where we left off with the last one. We have Michael succeeding as the new heir to the throne, so to speak. And it ends with now this man has basically effectively pushed everybody out of his life and he's left alone assuming that they went into this never intending to make another one. You can kind of assume that this last bit is years later and it's just, he is kind of left alone and his life is empty and hollow. And I like it. I mean, it's nothing too complex, but I still like it.
Yeah, it's nothing too complex in that it doesn't actually tell us anything thematic about the film as much as the first one did. The first really long shot, it tells us everything we need to know about the story. And in this one, we just get sort of his position of power very briefly, and he's old. The years have taken a toll on him. So, I don't think it's as strong as the first one, but Pacino, of course, these micro expressions that he's able to really cultivate on his face, I think are very strong. And we see it particularly in that last shot.
Yeah, which, I mean, it's a nice long shot, not 3 minutes or anything, but it's
right.
It's a beautiful long shot, and I think it gives us a lot. I mean, he's killed his brother, he's pushed his wife and kids out of his life, wife out of his life, and I think that there's something, just this dark place that he's left in, and I just feel like, this is this man who's just left, thinking about all the wrongs that he's done.
Let's talk about some of these performances.
Oh, yes. Yeah, casting by Jane Feinberg, Michael Fenton, and Vic Ramos.
And they brought back Mr. Pacino, again, as Michael Corleone.
What's funny is a lot of people say that this performance is Pacino's greatest in film history.
I disagree.
I'm torn because I often find Pacino really big and kind of over the top, like Scent of a Woman, where it's just, his bigness is great, but that's how Pacino is. So I like how controlled he is here, and I think there are a lot of really powerful moments where you can just read so much of what's going on in him and how he's thinking and everything. His confrontation with Fredo down at the New Year's party in Cuba. Boy, his confrontation with Kay when she admits that she had an abortion. I mean, that scene rips me up. I'd say it's one of his greatest. It might not be his greatest, but I can't think of what his greatest is.
Big Boy Caprice, Dick Tracy. Are you kidding?
I was going to say The Devil's Own, but to each his own, I guess.
I feel like this is, and I think part of the performance suffers from the sort of convolution of the part, and I don't see it quite as strong as some of his other films, even some of his less incendiary parts. I'm not saying this is one of his best parts, but in terms of his range, Insomnia, right? This part, he played Will Dormer in Insomnia, and it was a much different kind of part. And I think this film capitalized on exactly what he was in Godfather 1, and it wasn't anything particularly new. I don't think I could put this up against Vic Hanna and have it beat Vic Hanna in Heat, which was, I thought, an exceptional performance.
Yeah, I agree. I would put this above Vic Hanna.
You would?
I would, yeah.
It's really different, but in terms of strength and breadth of performance, I find that this film is exactly what I got in the other film. It's just a little bit older and a little bit longer.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think that there's a lot of more interesting things going on with him. But I mean, I can see what you're saying, though. And again, I don't know if I'd call it his greatest, but I do like his performance here. Or I shouldn't say I like it, but I feel that it, from my eyes, seems stronger than Vic.
All right. What about Robert Duvall is back as Tom Hagen? Briefly.
I feel so bad for Tom Hagen. I don't know why that is, but I mean, he always feels like he's getting kind of pushed out by Michael. And I think that's really interesting. And, it's never fully, there's not ever full closure. Although you do feel that Tom's at least going to stay in his life, because he does say, what do I need to do? And he helps him out at the end there. Again, going back to that subtext and the scene that Duvall has talking with Pentangeli in the FBI prison. Definitely one of my favorite scenes of the film. I love the conversation they have about Roman soldiers and just all of that. I think it's such an interesting way to play that. And, Duvall's Duvall. He's always great.
Yeah, he's great. I was disappointed that we didn't get more of him. It was a much more subdued sort of role, a much smaller role in terms of just screen time. And I think we got to see a lot more of Duvall doing great stuff in the first movie. And so I was just disappointed only in relative size of the performance that we were able to get from Duvall on screen.
Well, and it makes me wonder if that might be why Duvall did not sign on to come back for Godfather Part 3. I know Coppola wanted him back, but I think that he just didn't feel the part was there, and so at least that's kind of the impression I have, which we'll talk more about next week.
Diane Keaton, we said last week that Diane Keaton had more stuff going on in Godfather 2, and then we got to see it.
Oy.
She's strong.
She is great.
She's what was she? She's like 26 or something when she did this scene.
I don't know, but man,
she doesn't have much time, right? I mean, she's on screen fairly briefly, and that's largely because Michael has pushed her Kay out of his life as a result of all this stuff. And then we get the scene, right? The abortion scene that you've already mentioned, and you get to see just why Diane Keaton is Diane Keaton.
Yeah, it's so powerful, and watching her face when she's talking with Michael, and that look that she gets on her face when he is like, I know that you blame me for the miscarriage and all of that, and just the anger and everything that you see in her face, and then when she finally admits no, it wasn't a miscarriage, it was an abortion, and just like everything comes out, and it's like, wow, that is an incredible scene, and it just shows, exactly why Diane Keaton was so great. But man, that's a scene that just kills me though. Ugh.
And of course, it provides another opportunity for a Corleone male to knock over a chair, which happens. I don't know if you counted. This would be a great drinking game. Happens a lot.
All right.
You really want to do shooters. Sonny, you follow Sonny. He knocks over chairs all the time. Robert De Niro is new to this film from the last as young Vito Corleone.
Yeah, they couldn't get Marlon. I know Coppola tried to get Marlon back to play Vito, but there's a number of stories. He something of the money issues that he had with Paramount the first time. There's a story that the Paramount execs were still upset with him that about the whole Academy Award issue when he kind of had Sachin Littlefeather accept in his behalf. All of that, it just it never worked, and so. So he ended up, Coppola ended up casting De Niro, who's he's great in the role. He really works well. And I think he works really well as Vito, playing kind of that Marlon Brando character. And I love it. And I think he's a great addition to this franchise.
I totally agree, and I'm already on the record. This was the stronger part of the film for me, and it's largely because we get to see the sort of black hand side of the street gangs of New York. As he's trying to build his business and the things he decides in real time to do. To support his community. He's a community organizer, right? Like, 50 years later, and he could be a hipster, out getting Bernie voters to get to the polls, right? Anyway, I thought he was great.
He's great. And one of my favorite scenes in the film is when he takes on Finucci and kind of, like a cat, stalks him and then kills him under that flickering light with a towel around the gun. Such a brilliantly conceived scene.
I did not find this, but did you ever read anything about whether or not the flaming towel was intentional?
My understanding is it was. Coppola, again, going back to kind of how he was always trying to do deaths in interesting ways, he had read about this or heard about it somewhere, and he really thought that was a great visual, and he actually wanted that to happen. And so they planned that.
That is a fantastic shot. It's after young Vito shoots Finucci twice, and Finucci's death. I don't know if you noticed this. He pulled the same tongue thing in this film that we got when the police chief was shot in the neck last time. Did you notice that when he dies?
That was great.
It was great. There are some great death scenes in this film.
And I love how quickly he falls. Like he struggles for so long, and then all of a sudden he just like
drops. Okay, John Cazale is another one. We said, Fredo has a lot more going on in this film. He sure does.
I think that John Cazale is a really interesting actor, and it's such a shame that he was one of those people that just was not around for very long. He appeared in I think 7 films, and this is, I think, just such 6 films really, and then he archive footage of him in Godfather Part 3. I think that this storyline of bumping up the importance of Fredo in the film and kind of that relationship with Michael, I don't know. I find it really powerful, and how Fredo is just kind of dumb, and he gets himself into this situation where he nearly gets his brother killed, and it leads to this kind of family war. Brilliant. I also love how Coppola so often shows us Fredo lying in positions where he just kind of already looks like he's dead, or he's just kind of like this, limp body laying there. I love him.
I do too, and I think he's so well used, in the narrative, right? It's so funny that you bring up he's shot so often as kind of this rag doll, and yet when he's given a job that absolutely fits who he is, just like in the first film when they sent him to Vegas, and he came alive when he became the cruise director, like that was who he was supposed to be. And in this film, when they gave him people to entertain, he was great. He knew what to do. He was very charismatic. Like, you get to see him kind of turn on. I think it's a really interesting character in this film, and Cazale is such a great utility player. It's interesting to hear Coppola talk about Fredo. Apparently, Mario Puzo did not want Fredo to die at all, but he says that Francis was adamant. And so it was Puzo who said, okay, you can't kill him until after the mother dies, because he said he was afraid that if Michael had Fredo killed before the mother dies, that the audience would never forgive Michael. What do you think about that?
It's such a strange thing. I don't know if that's, coming from his Italian-American mindset or what, but, for me, it's just like, I don't know if it changes my thoughts of Michael on either side,
right?
Whether he kills Fredo before or after Mom was dead.
I thought that was such an interesting perspective that I had never thought of. Michael has done things that are absolutely unforgivable already. But apparently to kill his brother under the watch of his mother that's where the line is. I thought that was a really interesting perspective on family.
Last little interesting bit about Cazale is, I guess of his projects, he was actually only in 5 full-length films: The Godfather, The Conversation, The Godfather Part 2, Dog Day Afternoon, and The Deer Hunter. And plus his, like I said, the archive footage of him in Godfather Part 3. All 6 of the films that he was in, they were all nominated for Best Picture.
And I miss Stan, too. This made me want to go watch The Deer Hunter again. Talia Shire is back as Connie Corleone, the sister.
Yeah, the whole idea of the abortion was her idea, which Coppola originally thought was too much, but then he kind of latched onto it and went with it. And I think he made the right choice. Again, a little nepotism helps out, I guess. It was funny though. She was nominated for Best Supporting Actress for this, and she's fine in the film, but I just there's so little of her. I was just like, really?
I totally agree with that. I mean, her scene, her big scene at the end as she's begging Michael to forgive Fredo. It's a great scene, and it's great. But that's really her highlight performance, and it's in the last 15 minutes of the film.
Well, yeah, but I guess I would say you compare that with her at the open when she's with Merle. And she's just angry and bitter and kind of raging drunk, and clearly like that angry family member who's just going to do everything that they can to kind of hurt you. You can obviously see the transition. I guess maybe that's why they nominated her. But yeah, you're right. That probably is the bigger scene toward the end.
All right. What about the man, right? Lee Strasberg is Hyman Roth.
Oh, yes. The big acting teacher. I found it so interesting that he ended up getting cast in this. I guess Pacino recommended him because he was his acting coach. And I think it's fun to kind of see him acting, the guy who came up with the method, the father of method acting. And here he is, getting himself into his character using the method. And, it's fun to see. I really enjoy seeing him in this film. It's a great choice. And he does a good job here. I know Coppola originally wanted Elia Kazan to play the role, but I don't know. I like what Strasberg does here.
I do too. He is he's one of those characters that apparently this was one that represented Meyer Lansky, these real characters in the mob. That he, when we're introduced to him, he's got his leg over this wicker chair. He's watching football, and we get this incredibly subdued conversation about watching the football, and suddenly, all at once, as if both of these characters is in this conversation with Michael, and both of them at once know what to do at the same time, they stand up and go through the mechanics of rearranging the room, turning up the volume so that they can have their chairs closer together and talk to one another. And I really love that sequence. It is such a fantastic demonstration of, again, like you brought up earlier, subtext and what these two gentlemen are doing to have a gentlemanly conversation about something that ultimately ends in bloodshed.
So interesting. I really enjoyed him.
Michael Gazzo plays the Frank Pantangeli, the manufactured character, as a stand-in for Clemenza we talked about earlier.
I have such a great time watching Pantangeli, and I love his voice, and I just love the character. He just feels, he feels more old school than Michael. I love the bit at the beginning when he's trying to get the band to play the song, and he's working so hard at it, and then they just do "Pop Goes the Weasel," and it's just, I don't know. It felt like he's just stuck in the wrong time, like he would have been better off in the time with young Vito and young Clemenza and young Tessio, but Truly. Here he is trying to deal with this young punk kid.
Who else do you love? We've got a number of characters in here, but who else do you really love?
I think that's about it. Other than, we already mentioned Bruno Kirby playing Peter Clemenza, and we've, of course, talked about him in When Harry Met Sally. And then, of course, just the fact that young Danny Aiello and young Harry Dean Stanton kind of pop up in the movie.
I love it, and I didn't even notice it the first time I watched it. Until I started looking through the cast. I had to actually go back and find them. I thought that was great. James Caan does do a cameo, and man, he does all right.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah, James Caan apparently agreed to reprise the role of Sonny in that one scene at the end, that birthday flashback sequence, but he demanded to be paid the same amount he received for the entire previous film just for filming that one scene, and he received it.
Oh, to be James Caan.
That's right.
Because by then, even 2 years, James Caan, he realized, hey, you know what? I'm James Caan. And everything changed. We had a number of great cameos in addition to Sonny Corleone.
Yeah, it's in the Senate hearing scene, it's Coppola and Fred Roos. They got some old friends and people from the industry that they put in to play some of the senators. Roger Corman pops up in there, writer-producer William Bowers, producer Phil Feldman, and of course the science fiction writer Richard Matheson. And, of course, Melissa's his daughter, and we're going to be having a series of some of her films next year. So it's fun to see all those people pop up.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about getting the thing made. Gordon Willis is back as cinematographer. Don't have really much anything else to add to this. It still looks great. It looks as if it was one film.
Yeah, right. I think they did a great job of tying it all together nicely.
Production design also looks great. You really get a feeling this is New York. It is a beautiful sort of cascading, never-ending block after block of New York, of a classic New York. It really feels like you're there.
Yeah, Dean Tavoularis, who had done the previous film, I think what happened with Coppola at the time when he did the first film, all these established people felt he was this young upstart and who is this kid, all that sort of stuff. By now he had proven himself, and now they're all like, oh, okay, well, we can be partners and we can work on this together. And so it's funny. Dean Tavoularis definitely brought a lot of his amazing work to this. Like you said, just all that stuff in the old New York, all the the street scenes and everything is just so beautiful. And but there's one scene one story that I heard that I just thought was so funny. Hyman Roth, when they're down on the rooftop down in Cuba, one day I guess his sweater that he had been in, it's kind of a white sweater with a kind of black check pattern on it. It disappeared and nobody could find it. So the art department, they got a white shirt and a black Sharpie. They went to town and actually remade that shirt with a Sharpie just so they could finish shooting the scene.
That's awesome.
So tedious. Oh my goodness, so funny.
Speaking of costumes, Theodora Van Runkel was in charge of the costumes, and the costumes are great. You have to admit, the costumes look great, particularly jumping back and forth between these two periods. But this one bit stuck out. Some of the flashbacks ended up having to be reshot because originally the pants and jackets had zippers on them. And I did not actually notice this, but mostly because they had to reshoot them to remove the zippers, which weren't invented until 1913. So the first 13 years of the setting of De Niro, sort of young Vito's, they had to excise all of the zippers. I thought that was a riot. What a pain.
And now
they could.
Now James Cameron would just digitally remove them all.
Yes, exactly. And apparently it was one of the musicians that pointed that out, and it was not clear in the source that I read whether it was one of the musicians that was part of the scoring orchestra or a musician in some other context, like an extra that actually noticed on set that they had to go back and reshoot some things. So that was not clear, but whoever it was, kudos, musician.
So funny.
Being well read on the lore of zippers.
I know the history of the zipper, and that is not right.
It is not a zipper. I know zipper, Senator. You are no zipper. Let's talk a little bit about locations.
Yeah, the last film certainly had a number of locations, but boy, here we're in New York, we're in Lake Tahoe, we go to LA, Dominican Republic as Cuba, going to Italy and Miami. We're all over the place in this film.
It looks great. The Dominican Republic, particularly as Cuba, I thought looked really, really good, and they had to do it in such a way that make it it was a very dynamic time of revolution in Cuba, and I thought that was it was particularly strong.
Kind of the rise of Fidel Castro, which is interesting and very timely considering his recent passing.
The ship that brought Vito Corleone to America is the Moshulu, which only matters in that you can go eat there now. How great is that? It's a restaurant, and it's in Philly, and you can go there, and it's a fine dining place. You eat on this boat that's docked in the harbor there. It was also used. It was behind one of Rocky's workout scenes in Rocky 1, and it was also in the final scene of Blowout, which we've talked about on this show, and did not make mention of the Moshulu. I feel like we should go back and talk about it.
I can't even picture where it was, so I'm going to have to go watch it again so I can see this boat.
That's right. There it is.
So funny.
You can go to Moshulu. I think it's just moshulu.com and make your reservations. There you
Fantastic.
go. Or Open Table. Editing, Barry Malkin, Richard Marks, and Peter Zinner. It's interesting. I'm curious, though, we couldn't find anything about how they split up the editorial duties of this film. I wonder how they did it, knowing the way Coppola works with and tortures his editors.
Yeah, and it's interesting that there are three now dealing with just these two stories. So I do wonder exactly how he had it. Like, did one do one storyline, the other did the other, and then the third one kind of brought it all together? I don't really know, but I do find it kind of interesting that he had the three. I did find it interesting that it was very difficult to find the right pace as to how they cut between the two storylines. And I think it was some of the early cuts. They actually, audiences were really struggling because they were actually cutting between the two storylines far too frequently. And so they ended up bringing it back quite a bit. And now I feel like the pacing actually works pretty nicely between the two storylines. And then not to mention, I've already said that they did this chronological cut. Back in 1977, Coppola actually already did a TV version of these two films kind of squunched together chronologically with some cuts for TV and some deleted scenes and all that. So, I mean, there's been a lot of editing with all of these, but, I think that these three editors certainly deserve credit for coming up with the cut that they did.
Walter Murch was back for sound. Wait, he wasn't on the first one for sound, was he?
He was on the first one, not in sound, but in some capacity, like some consultant or something.
Yeah.
But this is definitely like early in the career of Walter Murch as he's
Right.
kind of starting to fine tune exactly what it is he's going to end up doing. But certainly, I mean, he's kind of a Coppola regular, and is certainly going to see him kind of continue his career with Coppola and his projects.
And Nino Rota and Carmine Coppola for music. It's very much the same theme.
It's the same theme, but I noticed that they hardly use the theme that he got busted for last time.
Right.
He uses some of the other themes, and then he adds some new themes. And I actually really liked all the music that he brought to the table here, or the two of them really brought to the table here. Although, it is interesting. Every now and then a movie does this. James Bond has done it, and here you have it where the actual theme song is played on a church organ in the film. So it begs the question, is like, do all the characters know this tune? It's like, I don't understand in films when you have a theme like that and all of a sudden you get this weird kind of meta entrance to this film where all of a sudden that film score in our world is introduced into their world.
I don't think you can get away with that without telegraphing that you're breaking the fourth wall, because that is a sign that our universes are the same, even though we know that they're not. And unless you're in a musical, unless you're Aladdin, you can't get away with that and make it sound normal. It really strikes me sideways. It'd be like if Jack started singing the theme song from Titanic while he's holding Rose and their arms are out on the bow. It just doesn't work. It struck me sideways too. How'd it do with the Oscar nominations? Was there any controversy as juicy as the last time?
Nothing as juicy, although you did have some people who did not show up. So it's interesting to see how all of this shakes out. This film was the first sequel to win Best Picture, so kudos to it for that. It did get nominated for a number of things, including Best Picture, and it did win against The Conversation. So Coppola was nominated against himself there. He got his Oscar this time, even though Bob Fosse, who had beat him last time, was also nominated for Lenny, but Coppola ended up coming out on top. Supporting actor Robert De Niro won. He was not present. And to this day, interestingly, both he and Brando are the only two actors to receive an Oscar for playing the same character. You and I know we're talking about this, and we're trying to what other situation could this have happened in? And we haven't quite come upon any great performance where a potential opposite could have also been nominated.
But you know who will? You know who will? I'm going to go ahead and call my shot right now, just like Babe Ruth. I'm going to call my shot. I'll bet the first person to tell us the answer to this question is going to be Nick Langdon. Nick, it's on you.
There you go.
We'll be looking for you on Facebook.
That's right. And then it also won for adapted screenplay, art direction, and original dramatic score. Interesting little note as far as the score goes. Carmine, he was walking back to his seat and he dropped his Oscar and broke it. And they had to give him, he broke his Oscar, and they had to give him like a little substitute one to carry around the rest of the time until they could get him a replacement, apparently.
Oh, no. That's the worst. I don't know. Would you rather drop your Oscar on the way back, or would you rather trip and fall on national TV, global TV?
Well, if you're Jennifer Lawrence, you'd rather just trip and fall because she always does that gracefully.
Let's just say you'd rather be Jennifer Lawrence. Who doesn't want to be Jennifer Lawrence? I mean, come on.
That's right.
All right. Keep going.
It was nominated for some other awards that it lost. Best Actor, Al Pacino lost to Art Carney for Harry and Tonto, again feeling no love from the Academy. Supporting actor Michael V. Gasso and Lee Strasberg were also nominated, but of course De Niro took that one. Talia Shire was nominated for Best Supporting Actress. She lost to Ingrid Bergman for Murder on the Orient Express. And Theodore Van Runkle was nominated for costume design, but she lost to Theone V. Aldridge for The Great Gatsby. And yet, once again, no nomination for cinematography. It makes you wonder if Gordon Willis's darkness was just not something people at the time could appreciate it. And it wasn't until much later that people really kind of accepted it for what it was and really started loving it.
I think that's a great point, and I've been thinking about it all week. Just what a clever cinematographer he is, and it is really sad that he didn't get it for this. Sequels, obviously, we're going to be talking about part 3, but this also made it into the small gamey screen. Yeah, did you ever play?
I didn't, but I know that they made a Godfather video game, and then they subsequently made a Godfather 2 video game. And apparently they kind of follow the story, but like you're a character, not Michael, you're just some other character in it. I don't know. It sounds so odd to me. Have you tried them?
No, I haven't. But I did run across a review that said it was pretty terrible. So I don't know. The screenshots that I found, they're color at least, and they weren't able to capture that real Gordon Willis. It's sort of from what I gather, it's kind of a side scroller, and so you're walking through old New York, but I'm not sure what you shoot at.
Yeah,
I don't know. Is what it is. All right. How about the numbers, Andy? How did it do?
Well, like we already mentioned, with the success of the first installment in this saga, they really amped things up here. The first one was shot in 62 days. This one, they had 104 days. The budget nearly doubled to $13 million, which is about $63.5 million in today's dollars, which, of course, you think about that and you're like, really? $63.5 million? That's, a modest film these days,
yeah,
not
right.
some 200-minute epic. But, it is what it is. This movie premiered December 12th, 1974, then opened wide on the 20th, opposite James Bond's The Man with the Golden Gun. And then, of course, a movie we're going to be talking about in just a few weeks, Black Christmas. The Godfather Part 2.
I don't even know what to say to you about that.
The Godfather Part 2, of course, shot right to the top, hitting number 1 at the box office, but it only stayed there for 3 weeks, getting knocked off by The Towering Inferno, of all things. The movie didn't do nearly as well as its predecessor, only making $57.3 million at the box office domestically, or $279.6 million in today's dollars. Poor them. I couldn't find any international figures, so I'll just have to go with that, which lands it at an adjusted profit per finished minute of just over $1 million. Like I said, it's not as high as the first film, but for a film that's 200 minutes long, $1 million per minute is pretty snazzy.
I don't know. I don't know what to say first. I have 2 things I need to comment on. The first one is, in our notes, Andy, have you really started abbreviating adjusted profit per finished minute?
Do you know how many letters that is?
I think this is the first time I've seen you. Have you been doing this all along?
No.
The APPFM?
I've just been doing it the last month or so.
Andy, that's fantastic. The APPFM, is this like an industry term that I don't know about?
It's an industry term in my head, yes.
Well, we're going to make it so. This is going to be the question I ask every speakeasy guest. Let's talk about their APPFM on their films. The second thing I wanted to say is that, yes, I have found the download for the Godfather original 1991 video game for the Commodore Amiga or the Atari ST.
Oh, wow.
So if you're interested, yes, I found them. I have 6 disc images for each version, and so you can play that too. I'll put that in the show notes.
So funny. That is just so funny.
Yeah, if you happen to have an Amiga emulator, that's what you're going to want to use. All right. Let's do it, Andy. I think it's time to rank it.
Let's do it.
All right. Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel, and you know the drill. Search for The Godfather Part 2 and add it to your flick chart, and let's just see where it hits. I don't know. I really, we're rolling the dice against each other here. I don't know if we're going to be in violent agreement.
Might be a lot of fighting. We'll see. The Godfather Part 2 or The Road Warrior. Part 2 versus Part 2. It's definitely The Godfather Part 2 for me.
Yeah, I think it's The Godfather Part 2 for me.
Good. I'm glad we didn't have to start there.
Starting there, yes. I mean, we're okay so far.
The Godfather Part 2 or The Dish. I am definitely The Godfather Part 2.
The Godfather Part 2, yeah.
The Godfather Part 2, this is where it gets tough. Aliens, Pete. Aliens.
Aliens, please.
I am going to say Aliens also.
Oh.
Yeah, I know.
Quelle
Didn't see that coming, did you?
surprise. No.
The Godfather Part 2, or The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
I'm thinking Good, Bad, the Ugly.
Are you?
Yeah.
I am going to say that too.
Why do you tease me so?
The Godfather Part 2, or My Neighbor Totoro. I'm going with The Godfather Part 2.
Over Totoro?
Yep.
I mean, this is the hate crime, right? I mean, how are you supposed to rank The Godfather Part 2 and Miyazaki?
Right, I know. The Godfather Part 2, or The Fly.
The Fly.
Believe it or not, I also say The Fly. Weirdly, those two are exactly next to each other on my flick chart. So they're like super close, neck and neck.
Oh.
The Godfather Part 2, or The Philadelphia Story. I'm The Godfather Part 2.
Okay, I'll give that to you.
There we have it, folks. Sandwiched between The Fly and The Philadelphia Story. Godfather is now 57 on our flick chart. Not quite number 1. But you know, I think it did well enough for itself.
That feels about right to me, honestly. You know, I was expecting it to be easily in the top 75. Like I knew it wasn't going to fall below 100, but I didn't think it was going to be in our top 20, for example.
I wouldn't have been surprised if it was, because I do really, really like the film. But again, we've talked about a lot of great films. So
yeah.
I guess to a certain extent, it does end up feeling like it's kind of in a pretty good spot.
Where is it on your personal flick chart?
Number 52.
Oh, 52.
Out of 3,500 something or other. So
it is, let's see, it out of, I only have 982 movies on my flick chart, 3,600 rankings right now, and this is at 127, if that gives you a sense. So it feels about like we're about in the same range.
Okay, yeah.
At least for the film board. So I feel like I won, is what I'm saying.
I see how it is.
What is your letterbox on this one? Still a 5-star? 4.5? 4 with the Andy half-star of love?
This is totally a 5-star film for me.
All right.
Totally 5-star.
It is not a 5-star for me. It's a 4-star film for me.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
great,
really surprises me.
127. I mean, it's great. It's great.
Okay.
It really surprises you?
Yeah, this film, I mean, while not as good as the first Godfather film, is such a strong film. I think there's so much interesting stuff going on here. It has some scenes that are just iconic, powerful, incredible scenes. I have a hard time seeing it.
No, I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. It does. It has a lot of really powerful scenes. It is a very long movie, and the stuff that takes place in the contemporary sort of in the future past is more convoluted than the stuff that I really loved about the first movie. That was also iconic and fantastic, and so I feel like it is a step down from that first movie and must be ranked as such. Dues
fine.
Must be paid, Andy. The line must be drawn here and no further.
Okay, have your 4-star.
And obviously, we already mentioned we're doing The Godfather Part 3 next week. We are. This is the last in our Godfather series next week. Anything you want to say about that?
I'm always looking forward to finishing the series and to seeing how it ends. Largely because I never remember Godfather 3 very well. So it's funny? Nice to kind of refresh it, yeah.
This is the one that I quote more than any other, right? Every time I try to get out, they pull me back in.
Yes,
that's the most quotable. I don't and the sunglass or the glasses, the assassination with the glasses. I remember those two things, and I have this vague memory of some of the actors. Yes. So I'm really looking forward to it. I feel like it gets such a bad rap, and I cannot defend why. I think I've only seen it like twice.
I think it gets a really bad rap unnecessarily, largely because of Sophia's performance, which, we'll talk about next week, but it's like to diminish the whole film because of that performance, I always feel just is awfully belittling.
Yep.
So anyway, I'm looking forward to talking about it more next week.
Me too. Until then, Andy, I clearly have got to go to bed.
All right, man. Well, I'm off to Cuba. Viva la revolución!
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
I'm gonna kick it off. Can I kick it off?
You do it.
This one comes from my dear close personal friend Sarah. She says she starts off with what is, I think, a standard trope on Amazon. She says, "I'm glad that the streaming kept getting interrupted so that Amazon refunded me for the rental because it was absolutely not worth my money. All of the heart of the first Godfather was just gone. Though I will admit that some of my distaste for part 2 comes from the lack of Marlon Brando." Noted. Robert De Niro's performance as Vito was less investing than what I'd hoped, and Coppola's anger at the interpretation of the first Godfather that Michael was a sort of hero shaped the film completely, as he made everything about the character unlikable. Though I'm sure that was the point. I don't see the point of having a protagonist that the audience doesn't like, honestly. I felt the only compelling aspect of the film was the twist that Kay had an abortion and not a miscarriage. It was a brave choice for both the character and the director. Overall, I don't understand why so many people enjoy part 2 as much or even more than the first, because I was unable to connect with any of the characters in this one. And I think that's actually an interesting point, don't you? That and I didn't come up against any of evidence that Coppola was angry at the interpretation of the first Godfather being too heroic, but maybe I just missed it.
I never heard anything about that, so it's an interesting thing to bring up. I don't know if I am going to hold much salt to it, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just I think that it was just a way to kind of continue exploring this character.
Yeah,
but.
Interesting. What's yours?
Well, I've got a 1 star by Tuco, who says, "Dark, dark, darker. Movie is a joke. This 2-disc set is worth crap. Scenes are so dark. What a joke. How a movie studio ever let this pass with the really poor, and I mean really poor quality, awful would be the correct word. Save your money on this one. Wow, what a piece of crap. Trust me on the quality. Junk." Then about 5 exclamation points. "If I could have given this a 0, I would have."
So, if you missed that, apparently it's crap.
Dark crap, Pete. Dark crap.
Oh, dear. Thanks, Amazon. It is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, I know. You're telling me. Producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
In Season 6, our Disease Films series had adaptations like The Omega Man, based on I Am Legend, The Andromeda Strain, Children of Men, and Blindness.
I Am Legend is so much better than The Omega Man.
What about the Will Smith version?
Don't get me started.
For our This Is Real Life Jack series, we talked Black Hawk Down and Seabiscuit, some great true stories based on fantastic books.
And we had more listeners' choices like The Fly, The Emigrants, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
You just did a series on The Fly on the Sitting in the Dark podcast. Did you read the original material?
Wasn't watching every Fly movie enough?
Our Big Betty Davis series featured adaptations like The Little Foxes, Now Voyager, All About Eve, and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Are you calling Betty Davis big?
Only in personality and force.
She is a force to be reckoned with.
We talked about the Godfather trilogy, of course. Iconic page to screen, even if it is just the one Mario Puzo book. I wonder if Coppola will ever make The Sicilian.
We also had some Zhang Yimou adaptations with Judo and Raise the Red Lantern. Absolutely gorgeous movies.
And don't forget the Hughes Brothers series with From Hell, based on the graphic novel. Brilliant material.
Kelly Reichardt gave us Wendy and Lucy and Certain Women, adapted from short stories.
Plus more Hayao Miyazaki as we tackled Howl's Moving Castle.
Find all these books and more at thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports the show.
Get the full list of adapted films that we've covered at thenextreel.com/originals and start your next read today.